Hello and welcome back, and that is right, we are continuing our look at the DS1522 Plus. It's probably one of the first real examples of the 2022 series from Synology Diskstation that finds a little line there between the home, the prosumer and SMB, and therefore a lot of people are curious about where this NAS is going to sit with some of those mid-range applications. And today it is the turn of Videostation. That is right, Videostation, Synology's own multimedia server platform there. There's applications on Amazon Fire TV. I believe there's lots of other client hardware out there, including mobile, that allow you to utilize their own client application to communicate with your NAS to enjoy all of that lovely multimedia. And today we're going to be running a number of different tests on different applications and services, and we're going to be looking at 720p, 1080p and 4K in a multitude of different formats. And the way we're going to conduct today's video is going to be as follows. It's all going to be accessed via the local area network there at the top of the screen. You can see starting 192. We're going to be playing files here in the multimedia outlet here in the web browser. On the right hand side of the screen you can see the IP there, exactly the same NAS that we're going to be utilizing to monitor the resources that are being utilized throughout all of these processes, and in order to simulate more limited connections or when files need to be changed, and otherwise known as transcoding, to be better suited to different network environments, different internet connection speeds, different devices like phones and more, we will be performing transcoding from within Videostation there. Now, if we go into the settings menu of Videostation, you can see with regard to the plugin information, we have enabled all of that scraped metadata there. And again, there's lots of guides in how to add that there. That's why we've got all of the lovely little graphics and stuff there on screen. Now, transcoding throughout the course of this is going to be, for example, when we're playing a film and lowering the quality there in real time. So, for example, if we look at the matrix here, we've got here on screen, just to give you some idea of what I mean by that, take a little look on the right hand side of the screen. You can see that CPU being utilized, and we will talk a little bit about the CPU in just a moment, but also the memory and everything else you can largely ignore, even the volume information, as we are utilizing 4 hard drives in this system in a RAID 5 environment. We've got more than enough performance to play with, and the 8 gig of default memory this system has. But if I go ahead and play the matrix here in the window, at the bottom of the screen, you're able to see that the playback quality we have there is the original quality, because it is a H.264 file, something else we'll talk about later on, and we've got it playing there in the background. So again, we can skip forward, we can do whatever we like, we can go ahead, and it's going to run absolutely fine there in the background in our browser. And again, there are mobile applications out there you can take advantage of, as well as some smart TV apps that you can utilize. So when I mentioned earlier on about transcoding, what that is for the uninitiated, and again, I know I've said this in other videos, but I've got to say this on behalf of people that haven't watched those other videos. Transcoding is when a file is reshaped on the fly. So say, for example, you were watching the matrix here on a train. You're commuting to work. Now, not only are you on a train and therefore the connection can drop as you go through different areas, whether you're using a cell plan or you're using the train's own onboard Wi-Fi, but on top of that, you're watching it on a phone. This is a 720p media file. This is quite a large file. You're not going to be watching on a massive screen. What you want is a slightly downsized version. Transcoding enables you on the fly to reshape a file to be better suited to the destination device and location and network connection, whether it's network throttling or just a simple low speed internet connection because the Wi-Fi is bad. Now, even though we're connecting over the network, we are able to simulate this. So for example, if we go back into the cog at the bottom, I can lower the quality there, and this will lower that bit rate. So for example, we can flick down to medium quality there, and now on the fly, the system will reshape this file into a medium quality playback there. And again, we can see while looking at the bottom of the screen there, a little bit of information, but not a vast amount of information about the quality of what we are watching right now. But still nonetheless, it has lowered that quality, and you've immediately seen that CPU there has taken a bit of a hit. It's also lowered the frame rate slightly, although do bear in mind that as we are using OBS to record today's video, that can sometimes impede the bit rate a little bit. So we're not going to judge Videostation too harshly for that. Now, while it does that there in the background, I will also highlight that although we do have memory network and volume here on the right hand side of the screen, I would argue that those aren't very necessary, because this system has 8 gig of memory when Plex will be fine with between 2 and 4 gig. The network doesn't matter because we're doing it locally, so we're never going to max out that 1 GBE, and volume, that isn't going to trouble this RAID 5 hard drive configuration. But what we care about is the CPU. Now the CPU is going to be the most important thing that we're monitoring here, because the CPU inside this NAS is a Ryzen embedded processor. It's a dual core CPU, the Ryzen R1600. Now that R1600, as you can see, is a 2-core at 2.6 gigahertz that can be burst up to 3.1 when it needs. The 8 gig of memory is great, but that CPU is the primary focus in this video. Why is that? Because it doesn't have embedded graphics on board. So for example, if we go ahead and now lower it to even lower quality there, we're able to see while we're doing this that that picture quality is going to be lowered again, but the CPU utilization is only going to be just as aggressive as what we've seen before there. And again, as time wears on, you're going to see the utilization on the right hand side of the screen get ever higher throughout all of our testing there. So again, at least we're able to play the file in its original format, and at the bottom of the screen you can see CPU utilization is already up to 81%, but still, this is quite a lot of hardware being utilized for this test. Now, if we come out of this one and we leave the matrix there, we can make our way into another media file. Let's, for example, go into Reservoir Dogs. And in Reservoir Dogs, we can see it's another 720p file there. Again, we can go ahead and play the file in the window. We can see that we're able to play it in its original format. If we go back to the picture quality, we're playing it in original. And later on, you're going to learn more about why that's so very, very important. If we carry on there, that's going to continue being quite low there. As you can see from that CPU utilization, when we exited the playback of that transcoded file, it went down to quite a low CPU utilization there overall. Again, occasionally we are going to refresh this page here just in case it times out, but I don't believe that to be the case here. So we go back in, resource monitoring, bring that up on screen. And again, what we can do is go back and see that it is utilizing not a huge amount of utilization across the whole system. If we come out there, zoom out completely, and once again, we can skip around on the file accessing over the network, and it does absolutely fine there. This isn't where we're going to see a tremendous amount of difficulty there when it comes to transcoding this file. So again, things are running fine. Why don't we action that transcode? And this time we're going to go straight to low. This is going to push the system a little bit there. It's still going to be quicker than if we did this on Plex Media Server for no other reason than on Plex Media Server, the system, even with a Plex pass, doesn't have as pure access to the system resources as Videostation, thanks to it being a proprietary application. If we zoom in, we can see CPU utilization has leapt up tremendously, just as we expected, but still nonetheless it's able to play back this file lovely and easily for us there. So again, we'll switch back to original quality, and the change should be immediate. Not only can we go back to flicking back and forth, but CPU utilization should shortly dip back down to a manageable number, as you can see there. So again, with regards to playing this file, Videostation seems to be doing absolutely fine. Next up, let's try a 1080p file. We're going to head in to Little Shop of Horrors, and from here, this is a 1080p file with a slightly higher bitrate. Let's go ahead, click play, and this should play in the window nice and easily. Again, it will play there. Again, CPU utilization very, very low. This CPU, despite its non-onboard native graphics, when it comes to handling 1080p media with no transcoding, it's absolutely fine. We can skip ahead, and we will see a slight increase periodically on that CPU utilization, but by no means end of the world level stuff there. Indeed, as we go along, although the refresh rate of that CPU there isn't tremendously fast, we're still getting enough information to go on. Indeed, if we zoom in, we'll hopefully see a much better score mark there in terms of that CPU. We could have stuck with the CPU utilization monitor there on the right, but the speed with which it updates might not be quick enough for us here. Let's have that there. And again, the spikes aren't quite as clear to see as if we utilized the the standard overview there. So I'm going to stick with the standard overview window here. Move that there on screen. So while we're looking at CPU utilization, once again, why don't we go ahead and do some transcoding. Again, we are going to lower the quality of this to the lowest degree, but this is a higher peak with which it's got to do the job. As we can see, we're seeing that leap now at 27%. Again, as it does this transcode, we're noticing the frame rate there drop quite significantly. Now, again, some of that frame rate drop is being caused by me utilizing OBS for this recording. And indeed, if we open up the resource monitor, you can see that the onboard graphics there are working quite hard. But a lot of that is simply to do with OBS being a hungry little monster. We can see that Edge might be using half a gig of memory, unlike Chrome, which is using 3.5, which is insane. But OBS is still being quite a little greedy monster there in the background. Needless to say, the CPU is still working pretty hard to transcode this 1080p file here in the background, as we can see at 91% on the NAS. But still, it is able to play and it is able to transcode. Now we're going to leave this and head over to our test files. The test files are the Jellyfish files. Now, these are the files that are the same 30-second file. Now, if we reshape these, we can see that the order there could be a little easier for us to follow there. So if we go with the title, so we'll go to the list. We'll see if we can reorganize. Unfortunately, we can't reorganize. What we're going to do is take a look at these files. Now, again, as mentioned, these are the same 30-second file. Now, the 30-second file itself, if we look at it, is simply 30 seconds of jellyfish bobbing around in some water. Now, why are we going to watch the same jellyfish bobbing around the same water for 30 seconds over and over again? Well, quite simply, because the Jellyfish files have got another lovely little bonus. And that is that it's the same 30-second file, as you can see here, but getting denser and denser, starting at a 1080p H.264 file and finishing down here at a 400 megabit 4K Ultra HD HEVC, or highly efficient video codec 10-bit HDR file at 1.4 gig, and it's still 30 seconds long. Consequently, what we're doing is we're testing what is the breaking point for multimedia on this NAS. We're going to be making our way through this system. Let's do this here. Let's do it by all. We're going to be making our way through this master list and working out at what point this NAS is no longer able. Wait a minute. Let's do it by descending title. We're going to see at what point this NAS can no longer play back these files sufficiently. Now, I mentioned earlier on about H.264, and I said other terms such as HEVC and 10-bit HDR. Now, as again, you've watched my other videos before on this subject, I may be being repetitious for you, but for everyone else, H.264 is a compression technique which is used to make movies that are played in cinemas and enormous screens be viewable from within your home. It's a compression technique, and it does make a lot of high-end 4K and 1080p media watchable in the home or even on mobile devices palatably, and keeps file sizes as small as possible. The patent for H.264 is open source. Everyone can use it, and therefore H.264 plays on everything. However, HEVC, otherwise known as H.264, is a more modern and much more efficient compression codec. Unfortunately, it is by no means as accessible and easy to have on your system as H.264. The patent for HEVC is shared via multiple parties, thereby making it either very expensive or impossible for a lot of client hardware, from NASes to TVs to home consoles to mobile devices, to always have it. Indeed, if ever you've tried to play a media file on your Windows machine and double-clicked it and it said Windows Media can't play this file, but yet VLC and Xvideo could play it easily, this is one of the main reasons for that. Consequently, when you try to play an HEVC file, despite H.264 playing easily and the HEVC file being in almost exactly the same size as you can see here, with both of these 3-bit megabit files being 10 megabytes per second, your system will have to work a lot harder to play the HEVC version. So, case in point, if I play this file here, Unlike the previous playback, where it played it instantly, you can see that in this case it's not able to play it. Now again, as mentioned, there are ways and means, as you will see here. When you go into your Synology NAS and we zoom out, you go to the package center there, and from here you can add those codec packs. Now installing this codec pack is incredibly straightforward. It's a very small file and it will download and install immediately. The only reason we didn't do it prior to this point was simply to show just how straightforward it is. If you click open, you then have to create a Synology Media account and it will allow you to view these file types. I'm going to go ahead and log in now and I'll bring you back after the login's completed. We're now signing into the account, and now that should allow us to access and install that HEVC content. And as you can see there, it's downloading and installing the full range of codecs that are supported. Again, this is recommended that you do that, and it has been made significantly easier in later versions of DSM than it was as little as 1.5 years to 2 years ago. And now we're up to date, we can make our way back into the Synology Video Station tool. We can refresh our page. From here, we can make our way back into that file, and now we're going to see a slightly different result. Let's go ahead, get the list on screen. We're going to refine that list, and now we can try and play that file, and now we're going to see slightly different results. As you can see, there's our HEVC file. We can go ahead and play it, and now the file will play. It will still utilize a notable amount of CPU resources, as you can see there, because the system has had to convert the file, but we can watch a high quality change of that file, but it still will utilize 94%. Don't worry about how this is displayed on the web browser. This is not how the intended user experience will be for you. This is largely down to OBS and CPU utilization, but still nonetheless, encoding is completed, and now we're able to play back these files. Of course, codec and re-encoding will happen with every juncture of these HEVC files. The same goes for HDR or 10-bit files there. So, now we've tried out the 3 megabits per second versions of these files, let's try the 10 megabits per second versions. So, firstly, let's go with the H.264. Nice and simple, it will play immediately and there will be no excess utilization there. We're playing the original quality file, it's playing in original, and although CPU utilization will be a little, such as 8% here, it's not going to be end of the world tough here. It's going to go straight in and playing like a charm. From there, I think we can come out of that file and now try the HDR or the 10-bit HDR version of that file. There is our 10-bit HDR version, so we can go ahead and play back that file. 3, 2, 1, go. And again, we'll keep an eye on the system. It will utilize more resources. Again, ignore the frames per second. And for now, as you can see, we're already getting that spike at 91%. Yes, this CPU is going to have to use raw CPU resources in order to get the job done due to its lack of an embedded graphics component on board, but still nonetheless, it is able to do the job, and that ultimately is what's the most important thing here. But just bear in mind, while doing this, that you're going to be losing a lot of resources being used by other things. As you can see, memory utilization didn't really take a hit, hence why we're not really monitoring it. And network, obviously more data is being moved around in order to output these files, but still nonetheless, the CPU utilization spikes are hard to ignore. Now we're going to go to a 30 megabits per second file, and we're going to go for a 30 megabits per second H.264. Let's go ahead and click play. Again, it should play easily, and it should play in the original quality, although utilization should be higher than it was last time. If we have a little look on the right hand side of the screen, we should get a real-time bit of information on that. But as this is a 30-second file, there's every possibility that the utilization fell between the cracks of the monitoring there. But still, nonetheless, absolutely fine. Next, we'll go to that 30 megabits per second H.265 version. There it is there. We can go ahead, play the file at 30 megabits. And again, because it's H.264, it's going to have to transcode that file in our browser for us here. But again, we're still playing it, and although utilization is still going to spike, unsurprisingly, we're still able to play back this file in Video Station on our 1522 Plus with this Ryzen embedded CPU. Let's come out and now make our way onto something even beefier, a 100 megabits per second H.264, still in the HD files. So we can go ahead, open it up there, and it will be a slight delay as we wait for it to do its job, because we are reaching now some particularly hefty files. Even at 1080p, this is still quite a lot of work to be getting on with. It's finishing the job up there, and slowly but surely it's coming through. But for now, oh, I accidentally paused it there, I do apologise. But for now, I would say that that works fine for me. So next we can come out, and this time we can go back to the 100 megabits per second, and this time we're going to look at the HDR version. Although I say that, we don't have an H.265 version. So for now, we're going to make our way into the 4K area. Now this is where this CPU, I think, is going to seriously struggle. So if we go with it here, we'll zoom out and we'll start easy. We're going to go with the 120 megabits per second 4K H.264 version. This should play, but even if it does play, it's going to push the system quite hard. So it's going to start its buffering process. I can't even open up the sub-menu right now. And if we open it up, go to quality, we're watching the original quality, and we're watching a 4K file at 120 megabits per second Ultra HD, and it is playing this file. Again, I'm impressed it's doing this, and it certainly is doing better than it did on Plex Media Server, but we are still seeing buffering issues. This pause here was not me accidentally pausing it. This is that the buffering range got hit. It wasn't able to buffer enough in advance for this NAS. Now, eventually it will play, but right now I would still not call this a success. From here, we can make our way into the 120 megabit HEVC version of this file. So there is our 120 HEVC, but it's a 10-bit HDR. This is going to be tough. This is going to be highly unlikely that the NAS is able to play this in any meaningful way. This is where this CPU, I feel, kind of walks off the plank a little bit, because this isn't a CPU that's going to have the resources that can be channeled towards graphical production on this scale. It could do it with 1080p, and as you can see, the buffering has hit very early on, as well as utilization, just hitting 99% for the first time in our tests. I don't believe right now at 4K this NAS is really suitable for this, at least as far as streaming over the network, because once again, bear in mind, we have added the HEVC codec. We have connected with Diskstation via the web browser here, and even the native client tool would do this, would still be not dissimilar to this, even with its glossy user interface. And we're seeing too many jumps for me to call this a success. Now, let's end it on the biggest file that we have here. This is the 400 megabits per second 4K Ultra HD HEVC highly efficient video codec 10-bit HDR file. Almost certainly the NAS will not play this smoothly, but will it play it at all? I'll be impressed if it does. Let's end on this note now. Let's count in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Because the CPU, we just wanted to give it a moment to crack down to those low percentages again. And again, I do think it'll at least have a try at playing this file, but its overall suitability and how well it's going to play that file remains to be seen. But for now, we're seeing that cog, and I think right now, we're going to hit a wall, unfortunately. And I do think right now, if we open it up, we open up the playback quality, although we're playing at that original, we're going to hit a buffer, and I reckon we're going to hit a buffer every few seconds. And this is ultimately the point. When it comes to 1080p on this, whether it is HEVC or H.264, this NAS is going to be great for 1080p. And by great, I of course mean as long as you're not doing lots of other things, you will be able to play even high-end 1080p. But when it comes to 4K, that CPU is just not tooled out for 4K. And even the mildest background processes on your Synology NAS are either going to interrupt the flow of this 4K over streaming or vice versa. And therefore, you may have more important mixed use for your Synology NAS, which may be under threat. Ultimately, right now, although it is taking a stab at playing this file, and I've got to respect that it is, I'm still not going to call this a success for me. And right now, I think I'm going to end things there. I hope you've enjoyed this video and looking at Videostation on DS1522 Plus. I don't really look at Videostation on many NASes apart from particularly popular ones so people can make the most of those apps. And I will be visiting a lot of different applications on this particular NAS because it is proving to be quite a popular system, from surveillance to virtual machines in the collaboration suite. So do stay tuned for that and click subscribe if you want to be the first to know when they go live. But otherwise, click like if you've enjoyed this video and found it useful. Again, it helps me know what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong, and take advantage of the links in the description to other videos and written articles on NAS Compares on the 1522 Plus, as well as the free advice section that you can take advantage of for help choosing the right NAS for you, and of course donation buttons and affiliated links below, which will help us in order to create better content, with all donations and all fees achieved through affiliated links going directly back into NAS Compares. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.